back in the bucket because we big drawing. Okay. Big drawing. Okay. So far, so good. So we're a minute off. You're good, Bob. Hi, how are you doing? Yes. So good. Thanks for being here. So,
on Cody King, Capital Farm Credit for corporate sponsorship. Cody?
Okay, so I'm not a public speaker and I didn't take my blood pressure pills today, so if I, pass out here, don't let Andy give me mouth to mouth, okay? But, so I'm just gonna, real short and sweet, talk about who we are as Capital Farm Credit, what we do and what our value is to you. First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my right and left hand, Ashton Macias, that helps me run this local office. So my offices are here in Canadian and also in Perryton. We have the folks from Pampa here, Ty Kuntz and Brandon Dukes. And then in Dalhart, we've got Mark Hanberry out of Dalhart here representing that office as well. So who are we? Number one, and first and foremost, we're a customer-owned cooperative in the very truest sense. And I think that's really important because it's very rare these days do you have a true cooperative. There's a lot of people, a lot of cooperatives out there, but in my mind, a true cooperative is one that operates in the best interest of its borrowers or members. And I feel like we do that, and the reason we do that, or one of the ways we show that, is we give back almost 100% of our net profits, which is unheard of today. If you deal with a cooperative, that might be a good question, whether it's a grain elevator, a feed store, another lender, any kind of cooperative. You ought to ask them, if you remember, what percentage do y'all give back? And I guarantee you, most of them are going to be at 50% or less. Last year we were at 98% of our net profits we return to our members, which are our owners, and that's who we work for, truly work for. We're over 100 years old. We're obviously an ag lender, and we're the largest cooperative ag lender in the state. Bigger's not always better, but here in a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit of why I think it's better in this case. We have offices in 192 counties across Texas, which is about 85% of the state. Pretty much everything except kind of a northeast corner of Texas, kind of from about Fort Worth east and north of I-20 is about the only territory that we don't have in Texas. What we do, we specialize in everything in agriculture: land, livestock, equipment, farm and ranch operating loans, all the above. So we're a one-stop shop. We don't just cherry pick the land. We do it all. So that's what we do. every day. And we're in the ag business year after year. We're not one of those banks that's, hey, we're going to do ag this year, and next year we've got too much in our portfolio. We're going to get rid of some ag business. That happens a lot in the commercial world, so we are not that. And then last but not least, where is the value to you? Well, we talked about being the largest cooperative lender and the most profitable. And you think, well, why is that important to me? If you're profitable, you must be making too much money, right? Again, we give 98% of our profits back to our members in the form of a patronage. So like last year, we did $220 million in net income. Now we're at $8.7 billion with a B in loan volume. And our patronage, last year, we gave about 45% of that $220 million in our cash patronage, which was in the spring. And then our allocated equities, we're going to give 55%. The rest of it in our fall patronage. So, and what looking at it a different way, if you look at a percent of the interest that you paid us in our cash patronage this last year, you got 23% of what you paid in interest you got back in the spring, and then you're going to get, our customers would have got 27% in the fall. So a total of about 50% of the interest you paid, you're going to get back, okay, in the form of a cash patronage in the spring and allocated equities in the fall. So bottom line, if you had a 5% interest rate, by the time you get your patronage back, you're going to be at 2.5%. And that's a fairly common number. So just think about that. What loans you have, what loans you're looking at getting in the future, how much that could save you over time. It's huge, huge number, and we can help you with those numbers. So that's all I have. We're right back here in the back. If we can help you in any way whatsoever, come visit with us. We'd like to do business with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody, for that. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shannon Farrell. And by the way, this is sponsored by Westway Feed. Dr. Shannon Farrell is currently an associate professor in the Oklahoma State University Department of Agriculture Economics, where he specializes in agricultural law. He grew up on a cattle and wheat operation in western Oklahoma and obtained his bachelor's and master's degree in agricultural economics from OSU before obtaining his Juris Doctorate from the Oklahoma City University School of Law with endorsements in estate planning, business and financial services law. Shannon spent a number of years in private practice focusing on agriculture, environment, energy, and corporate law before joining OSU in the summer of 2007. As a member of the Department of Agriculture Economics, Shannon holds an extension and teaching appointment. Since joining Oklahoma State University, he has provided over 300 extension seminars and workshops throughout North America, and with a cumulative audience in excess of nearly 19,000, while authoring over 50 extension publications, including serving as lead author on the Farm Transition Workbook. His extension activities encompass all areas of agricultural law, and he also teaches the agricultural law courses both at Oklahoma State University and the University of Oklahoma College of Law. Please help me welcome Dr. Shannon Farrell.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Howdy. It's nice to talk to human beings. So, a little bit of background on what I've been doing for the past year. The last thing I did in public, March 11th, 2020, I gave a presentation about farm transition planning in Springfield, Illinois. I drove home, and then we shut it down. So this is my first chance to really talk to human beings live since then. I was talking to my colleague Tiffany. Some of you guys might know Tiffany. She's the Shannon Ferrell of A&M, or I'm the Tiffany Lashman of OSU, however you want to look at it. And she's like, what are you going to talk about tomorrow? I said, farm transition planning. And I've had a year of pent-up rage to unleash on these people. So I'm going to get a little preachy today, because even though I haven't been out in public, doesn't mean I haven't been dealing with farm estates. Folks, I'm tired. I kid you not, because I've been dealing with my wife's family's estate. Her grandmother passed away a few weeks ago. I've been dealing with a farm estate where I'm helping an orphaned set of kids because both mom and dad passed away of COVID. I'll tell you a little bit later about a family where 50% of their immediate family was wiped out in this pandemic. Folks, I'm tired, okay? And I'm tired of seeing the fact that with a little bit of planning and a little bit of initiative and admittedly a lot of courage, none of the horror stories I'm going to tell you today had to happen. They were all completely avoidable. And in agriculture, folks, you are some of the most hard work, scratch that. You're the hardest working, most courageous demographic we've got in this country, okay? But here's the thing. You're scared to talk about your feelings. And I hate to tell you, but to have a successful farm transition, you got to open the black box and talk not only about the farm financials and how profitable or not your farm's been over the past few years. You might have to tell people you love them. You might actually have to tell them that you care about them. You might actually have to tell them that you care about what they think and that maybe you're not going to run this farm as a command and control operation. We're going to talk about hard truths today, folks. And I know that you guys have confronted a lot of hard truths over the past year. So before I start talking about this stuff, I want to talk about mental health because we have got to talk about that. We've been silent on that in agriculture the entirety of our existence. And how's that working out for us? Well, we have a second suicide rate, second only to those in military service. You take those out of the demographics, agriculture has the highest rate of suicide basically of almost any industry in the country because we don't talk about how we feel. We're tough, we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and by gosh, suck it up, buttercup, right? Like we're immune to this. I get it, folks. It's been a hard year. I mean, it was hard before this. You throw a pandemic on top of it, the massive turmoil you've seen in our markets, the fact that we've lost so many folks in our rural communities. I grew up in Leedy, America. We lost 3% of our population in the pandemic. Now, that's not hard when there's 345 of you, but you take out 10 people from Leedy, America, you notice, okay? It's been tough. So what we've done at OSU is try to put together some resources for you to help the people around you. And if it's not them, it's okay for you to help yourself too. Extension.okstate.edu/farmstress. We've got a library of stuff there, but the stuff I'm most keen on is this video series right here. If you just don't know where to start, you're worried that you have a friend, you have a neighbor, you have a family member, you've got a spouse, or it's you that's dealing with this stuff, you can start learning about it right here. How do you communicate with the people that you love in a loving way when stuff's pretty tough? That's something we could use in agriculture, right? When disaster hits, and we're talking about the hailstorm that turns your wheat crop into red clay flavored flour, or you've got a massive herd die off, or the farm stress has gotten to be too much and you're going to have to liquidate. How do you handle that? Just basically the introduction. Would you know depression if it walked across the street and slapped you in the face? You might be surprised. What does anxiety look like? You might be surprised by the things that you're doing and don't really realize that you're doing, and you're realizing that's an indirect effect of anxiety. It's okay to feel anxious. I went to law school. I had anxiety for 3 years, day and night, 24/7, right? Managing farm stress productively. Using mindfulness. How many of you all meditate on a daily basis? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of hands shoot up in this crowd. I got 1, 2, outstanding, yes. Mindfulness does not mean that you get on the flat bed of your pickup and go home, right? That's not mindfulness. That's just simply being able to control the moment. I know if you've been in agriculture longer than 30 seconds, there has been a period in your career where it felt like stuff was just crushing down on top of you, right? All mindfulness is teaching yourself to step out of that moment, collect yourself, and think like a rational human being. But if you guys do nothing else, I want you to go home and I want you to watch our Suicide Awareness and Prevention in the Farming Community video. That's done by Dr. Amanda Straczynski. She does a fantastic job. But the takeaway from that is that you can be a lifesaver, honest to goodness, if you're not afraid to talk to somebody who's showing some signs that they might be thinking about self-harm or suicide. And folks, the research is abundant. If you run into someone that's showing those signs, you're not going to send them hurtling over the edge if you ask them, hey, are you thinking about suicide? The research shows you quite the opposite. Someone asking them if they're thinking about it often shocks them enough that they kind of like say, whoa, I didn't realize it, but I really was. And furthermore, it shows that you cared enough to ask them. There are hugely positive intervention rates when somebody just asks. So please, if you guys have the time, watch those. They'll be huge. All of this is relevant because we're talking about emotional stuff. And I'm going to get into the economics. I'm going to get into law stuff. Trust me, I will bore you out of your minds before you get lunch. And by the way, I have a timer going because I'm fully aware that the only thing standing between you and your next meal is a lawyer. So I understand that. I promise I will not make you late. Folks, the economic stuff is easy. The accounting and tax stuff is easy. The legal stuff is easy. It's the relationships that are hard. The hard part about family business ain't the business part. Amen? Amen, right? It's the family piece. So I'm going to tell you about my story, okay? Now, I'm going to be stabbing myself directly in the heart to say this. I am a farm kid, right? I was raised a tractor pilot in the rough plains of Roger Mills County, Oklahoma. But, my dad sat me down when I was in the 4th grade, looked me straight in the eye, and said, son, never come back to this farm. Bear in mind, when I was in the 4th grade, it was 1984. And we were going through this little thing called the farm crisis. Some of you guys might have heard of it. And my parents were both working multiple off-farm jobs to keep us solvent. And my dad looked me straight in the eye and said, son, don't ever come back to this farm. This is no way to make a living. You get a college degree, you get a job with a steady paycheck and air conditioning, but you don't come back here. Okay. For once, I actually listened to my dad, so I went to OSU, got my degrees, and kind of do this as a living. So my act of rebellion is I don't farm my own farm, I just help all you guys farm yours. However, 8 years after I showed up on the scene, along comes this person called Adam Farrell, my youngest brother. Farm kid from day one. Always knew that's what he wanted to do, and curiously, Dad had forgotten the never come back to the farm talk. And without him, it was like, yeah, come back to the farm, be a partner, help us farm into our old age. And I was like, okay, never mind, it's fine. It's cool. So Adam moves back, and working in tandem with my dad, in the few short years he was working there, he and Dad quintupled 5 times. Quintupled the acreage they were operating. My brother actually convinced my dad to do some risk management, which I'd been yelling for years because, master's degree in ag econ, begin, whatever, right? But things were clicking right along. And then on October 26, 2015, at about 2 in the afternoon, I get a call from my mom about this guy. She says, Shannon, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm just going to come out and say it. There was an accident on the farm, and Adam's gone. That's it. He's gone. Basically, a truck collapsed on him. He was working on the truck collapsed, killed instantly. And that's it, folks. That's the farm heir right there, gone. And I know all of you know a story of someone who had an untimely death, and honestly, when is death ever timely, right? But that's it. There is no successor to the Farrell Farm and Ranch. I do this stuff for a living. My middle brother, Nathan, is a superintendent for an oil and gas company down in Midland, Texas. We're not coming back to the farm. So what do? Right? And this was a perfectly happy, healthy, 31-year-old guy with the rest of his life ahead of him, gone. And now that entire farm's plan is basically thrown into disarray. All this to say, folks, you all know the stories, and they're all perfectly abstract until it's you, right? Until it's your family, or it's your brother, or your sister, or your mom, or your dad, or your kid, heaven forbid, right? So I tell you this story because you think that your estate plan is some abstract thing. If I die someday, I need to correct you on that. Did you know that statistically 100% of people have died? Now, if you read the Old Testament, you know that Elijah and Enoch, they just got snatched off, right? So they technically didn't die. However, if you read the New Testament, there are a few people in there that died twice. For example, Lazarus. So statistically, see, it all balances out. 100% of people have died, okay? This transition planning stuff is not an if question. It is a when question, and here's the problem. You don't know when. And if you don't know when, what's the correct answer about when you ought to start? Today. So that's what we're going to talk about. You're going to preserve a future for people like this guy. This is Farrell 2.0, okay? And I honestly thought, you know what? With Uncle Adam around, I don't have a shot really of ever going back to the farm and ranch, and that's okay because I love what I do. But maybe Uncle Adam could be the bridge to get Farrell 2.0 back onto the Farrell Ranch someday. And now that bridge is gone, right? The reason I tell you about this is the fact that you don't know what the future holds, obviously in terms of when people are going to die. By the way, people are rude. They will do it out of order and when it's really inconvenient for you. But the other thing is, you don't know what people's futures look like. If you're trying to plan something that'll create an opportunity for the next generation or the generation after them or after the generation after them, you've got to figure out ways to leave doors open to create pathways for people to mature into ownership, economic participation, risk, and that doesn't happen overnight. You have to not only develop the opportunities for those people, you have to develop those people. You have to raise and develop managers and leaders. And the way to do that is not, someday, son, when I'm cold and dead, this can all be yours, but not before then because you can't farm as well as I can't, right? You operate stuff in a black box. The black box only opens when you die. That's not a management training program, folks, okay? So we're going to talk about how to develop that as well. And we've all seen this, right? We've all seen the family out there that's, hey, they've got it together. They've got a pretty decent-sized land holding. I wonder what's going to happen to that joint. Let's take this farm-owning family from back east for example here, right? Now, Mom pretty much calls the shots in this family, but she's 95. Now, very recently, she lost her husband, age 99, who'd been there the whole time, right? But now I want you to think about something. At this age, right, if they've survived this long and thrived this long, well, then let's think about their kid. Their kid's 72. And has kid ever had a day at the reins of this farm and ranch? Nope. I saw a story from one of my friends about a 40-year-old who had their first time running the planter this planting season because Dad finally thought he was ready at 40. So, aggressive management development program there too. At this point in time, statistically, it's entirely possible that this farmer ranch completely skips their kid. Entirely possible. So then, waiting in the wings is grandkid, age 38, smart kid, responsible, by all accounts, has done a great job with everything he's ever been handed, and he's working hard to make himself ready, but is he ready? Right? You've got this generational sandwiching issue that we have to contend with. Let's put aside the fact that, wow, if we put off an estate plan, we can put off our estate plan until it's too late, period, for us. But by delaying the development of that next generation and giving them a chance to meaningfully participate in management, they could get cut out entirely when they've spent their entire lifetime aspiring to be part of the management and leadership of that farm or ranch. And if we do that and skip them entirely, then have we done a good job of preparing that next generation? Unless these guys seem like an abstraction to you, yes, it's an extreme example. They have 500,000 acres of farmland and own some other stuff like the minerals of Canada, but whatever, right? If I take that picture away, that's my family. My grandmother was 94 when she passed away. If my grandfather had been alive to this point, he would be 97. My dad is 70, I'm 45. So if Grandma Farrell had held on to everything, which, by the way, she didn't. She let her kids have stuff well before that. But if she'd held on to everything when she died, my dad would only now be taking over that farm or ranch. My dad has 2 artificial hips and is about to get 1 artificial knee. He has no original OEM parts. He's all aftermarket now, right? And he's thinking to himself, I'm not sure how much cattle ranching I need to be doing, because the reason for the hips is that the heifer went this way, and Dad tried to go that way, but his hips stayed over there. And so he's kind of starting to figure out physically he can't quite do as much stuff as he wanted to. One last thing before I get off this, because I'm a Brit, okay? I am the grandkid of a war bride from World War II. So I've got a real deep affinity for England, and my grandmother's family's job was gardeners for these people. So I kind of pay attention to the royal stuff. This picture just hit me so hard when I saw it, because the Queen and my grandmother were the same age. They did the same kind of stuff in World War II, so I've always kind of viewed her as a proxy for my grandmother, and since she's passed away, you know, my other Gram here, that's who I've got. But I'm telling this because I want to speak to the ladies in the room, and I'm very pleased to see a lot of you here today. Guess, between husband and wife, 80% of widowed spouses are which one? The ladies. If you need to know why 80% of widowed spouses are female, hop on YouTube. You'll figure it out pretty fast. You never see girls go, hold my beer and watch this. So, Mama, I'm talking to you. If that man of yours does not have an estate plan in place, ride him till the sun goes down, then wake up the next morning and do it again, whoop and spur, okay? Because guess who's going to deal with the mess that he leaves behind? You. And I see it all the time. Here's a fun fact. Widowed females are 3 to 4 times more likely to live below the poverty line than their married counterparts, because the first victim of a bad estate plan is a surviving spouse. So, go get them, ladies. I also want to talk about the demographics of this, because we've talked about timing so much. This is an actual interactive graph of U.S. population. You got women on the far side, you got men on the near side here, but you keep an eye on the clock up at the top. That's what the U.S. population has looked like over time. This graph goes back to the 80s and goes out until about 2050, if I recall correctly. And you see that bulge there, right? That's the baby boomer generation marching up this histogram. But if you notice something, that when we get to 2020, right there, you'll notice that that baby boomer generation is starting to taper pretty significantly, because most of our boomers now are, you know, age 65 and older, which, by the way, is the demographic that got most drastically hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. We lost over 500,000 Americans, which on this chart, if you were to put that in any one demographic, that would put a pretty decent dent in it. We're seeing a huge acceleration of transitions occurring in agriculture because it hit us disproportionately hard in rural communities and in agriculture. And there were lots of farm transitions that got hastened by a lot as a result of that. So all this to say is you're dealing with an hourglass and you don't know how much sand's in it. So let's start talking about what we actually need to do here. Unless you think I'm talking to the, can't say that word, I'm going to say more seasoned operators in the crowd, not old people, right? Who needs to have a will? Who needs to have life insurance in place? It's everybody. And quite honestly, I'm not worried about putting old people on the street, because generally speaking in agriculture, I'm speaking in broad strokes here, our older operators are generally in pretty good equity positions. So I'm not really worried about them going bankrupt with a surviving heir, but that's very easy to happen to a young family. Think about you when you were starting out. Mountain of debt, working at least one off-farm job so you can make sure that you're covering those payments, right? What happens if we lose one of those folks? Your surviving spouse is in a world of hurt. And I'll go back to my own family's example here. Ma and Pa Farrell, along with my brother Adam, had actually bought, that's not even an English word, had purchased a section of land in Follett, near Follett. 640 acres, all under pivot. That was meant to be the forage engine for the operation. They knew that if they had irrigated forage, they would always be able to feed out and have some control over that risk. Went into a pretty decent amount of debt to purchase that. Adam passes away. Adam was a healthy, otherwise, 31-year-old, unmarried guy, right? And as such, should he have bought life insurance? No, he's young and healthy, and he doesn't have a spouse. No, but he does have about $1.5 million of debt attached to his name. So that was fun to deal with. When term life insurance for him would have been dirt cheap, mom and dad could have paid off that place like that, and it would have been a lot smoother. And they did get it paid off, and now it's been sold, right? But that was 5 years versus something that could have been turned around with a check in the mailbox in about 6 to 8 weeks. Young families, I don't care who you are, if you're married, if you're single, you need to have some sort of a plan in place. But if you're also, by the same token, your farm's just kind of on the verge of being viable, right? It's just now to the point where you're like, all right, I need to let go of this off-farm employment because I need to concentrate on the farm or ranch. If we lose you, your farm or ranch is in a lot of trouble. So you need to have a plan in place. Farms with limited asset liquidity. Let me correct that. Farms with limited asset liquidity is another way of saying farms, okay? Because what makes up 86% of the U.S. farm balance sheet? Land, right? And we all know it's completely easy, both emotionally and economically, to sell farmland, right? Ha 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 ha. How many of you have been told by some member of your family to never sell farmland? My father-in-law started telling my son that when he was 2. Appreciated that, right? All right, well, and I get it, right? But here's the thing, farmland can be sold. It is possible, and, you know, it can be done, but people are kind of reluctant to do it because, especially if I own it, and I own it debt-free, wow, that's a huge asset to have under control. I want you to underline mentally what I just said. If you own your land debt-free, that's great. Don't make your farm go into debt to buy itself back from itself. And if that sentence is confusing, good. We're going to explain how confusing that is here in just a little bit as well. Complex families, if there have been remarriages, if there are step siblings involved, you have all those family dynamics in place. You need to address those proactively, right? And set some expectations for folks and help them to know how they're going to mature in the roles that they might have to have this farm, and how does that affect a spouse, how does that affect your kids versus their kids, so on and so on. How are we doing on this, by the way? I want you to guess. Don't worry, don't have to raise your hands. I just want you to mentally fill out this little quiz. How many family-owned small businesses, which includes farm and ranches for this survey, by the way, could survive one generational transfer from the founding generation to the next generation? The answer is 30%. Less than a third of farms and ranches will successfully make it intact from the founding generation to the next. And oh, by the way, if I extended this, I'd show you that the next generation, that number falls to 12%, and the next generation, that falls to 3%. So by the time I get from great-grandparent to their last surviving generation, if I started with 100 farms, 3 of those are still intact as a unified operation there. We've got it's about $3 trillion per year now changing hands because we're getting into that baby boomer generation, which received all of their wealth from the traditional or greatest generation, but they received it really late in life, if you think about it. So now they're just getting it for just a few years before they turn around and hand it off to the smallest generation in U.S. history, Gen X, right? And then we got to turn around and give it to those goofy millennials, but whatever, fine, right? How many farms are we transitioning? The answer is 1.5 farms a minute at our current clip. So it's kind of moving there right along. I want to talk to you guys about practically how this looks, and then we're going to talk about what you can actually do about it. And it's hard for me to follow a farm for 40 years because hopefully I'm retired by then. So I just made a farm up. I've talked to Andy and I talked to a few other of the A&M professionals too, and got some data together, and I made up a farm that we run through a model that we have at Oklahoma State University to show the effects of different transition strategies. So I want to show you what this farm looks like. So, right, we've got mom and dad, then we've got farm kid, and we've got city kid. So there are two siblings. One of them has gone off to make their fortunes elsewhere. One of them has returned back to the farm and intends to take it over someday. And then with our hypothetical farm, I need to show you everybody's ages because this age stuff matters. I assume that mom and dad got married at the average age of U.S. first marriage. So they did that when they were both 26. And then at the average age of first birth in America, they had farm kid. I assume that farm kid's the firstborn. And that city kid showed up about 2 years after that. And I could assume that mom and dad were smart enough at the age of 40 to start doing some transition planning, but that's wildly optimistic in my professional experience. So then, mom and dad actually figure things out when they're 58, which is the average age of a U.S. farmer or rancher. Then they go, you know what, we should probably do some transition planning. Okay, if they have figured it out then dad has less than 20 years to bring that plan to fruition before statistically he would pass away. Then mom comes shortly after that, and let's say after the second of them to die, all right, farm kid, now it's yours, go do some stuff with it. Well, farm kid has 21 years now before statistically he would pass away as well. And that's why in this study, by the way, I never gave a transition plan more than 20 years because statistically, that's how it's panning out. At most, you probably have 20 years to effectuate whatever you're trying to do. Well, what was I trying to do here? I took a farm with, there we go, that would generate a net income of $100,000 a year. So that's what you have to basically take home. We gave family living expenses of $70,000. You can see the value of the production. Our total assets are about $3.3 million, which is split between cattle and crops. So this is a winter wheat stalker / cow-calf operation. They own about 1,100 acres and they lease another 2,500 there. So we said, all right, you've got 20 years to do whatever you're going to do. You figure out how you're going to transition this farm to the next generation. And so I'm going to spare you the boring stuff here. We basically took 20 years of net farm data and randomized it so that your farm would experience some ups and downs. It would have some good years, it would have some bad years. And the question was, would the farm generate enough cash for you to do whatever it was you were planning to do? We'll talk about that here in a second. So we wanted to really try this, and we run this simulation 500 times so that we really kind of capture all of those effects there. So number one, I love all my kids equally, so I'm going to give them undivided shares in everything. Because we all know you honestly love your kids equally, right? You don't possibly have a favorite. It wouldn't at all be the firstborn kid that did everything that you said, right? It's got to be the other kid that wrecked 3 cars in a row and burned one in flames, right? Not that I have any bitterness to work out about that at all. It's fine. But I want you to think about that for a second. We're going to treat all my kids equally, and the rationale that I hear for this, left, right, and center, is I don't want there to be any fights. To which I say, that's hilarious. If you want a strategy to guarantee fights, there it is. Here's the problem. You've guaranteed fights after you're there to mitigate them. You can't moderate conflicts between your kids after you're gone, but I'm just here to tell you, for lots of reasons we're going to explain here in a second, that's probably not a great idea. So there's that one. Okay, I love my kids equally, but I know that farm kid wants the farm, so I'm going to give him the farm. Well, that means that you have to come up with the equal part for city kid, which means you have to have enough financial assets not tied to the operation of the farm that you can give an equal value to city kid. And I know whenever you farmers have a good year, you don't buy new equipment so you don't have to pay the IRS anything. Thank you, Section 179. You don't go out and buy another piece of farmland. That'd be crazy. You invest in an indexed 401k plan or an S&P 500 fund with a low... Some of you guys are looking at me like I'm crazy. You give a farmer money, what are they going to buy with it? Land or paint, right? Okay. So for all you that have lots of liquid financial investments out there besides the farmer ranch, I'm sure that one's going to be easy too. Okay, different approach then. we're going to change things up. We're going to give Farm Kid all the operating assets, and we're going to give City Kid a financial asset equal to the operating assets, but land is going to be shared. Now, nothing could possibly go wrong with that, right? All we've got is City Kid telling Farm Kid how to operate the land base because they're both generating returns from that, okay? Or we can change things, except now we recognize, City Kid, we love you, but you haven't really done anything around here in 20 years. So we're not really going to give you any of the farm operating assets. We'll give you a financial instrument, but the financial instrument's going to be smaller just because it's a gift. So we're just going to treat it like a gift. You run through all this, then you can do this really wacky thing where you transfer the farm while you're alive. You have this program whereby the next generation can purchase equity from you. So you could actually harvest the equity that you've built in your farm or ranch over your lifetime. You might actually get something out of this farm other than a half of beef and a really old house. Okay? That means that over time, the next generation gets to grow in their management, which also means their voting rights, okay? But you're shifting that gradually over time. And if City Kid wants to come in, you can do it, but you got to buy in, okay? You got to have some skin in the game for this to happen. And weird how your perspective on this stuff changes when you've got some skin involved, right? So when we're talking about a lot of these strategies, what we're always having to deal with is that land piece, because land is almost always an overwhelming chunk of the equity value of that farm. And we do not want to buy it back from ourselves. Economically, that's nuts. But if we force Farm Kid into a situation where they have to buy out City Kid, whether that's, desirable or not from an emotional standpoint, we've got this farm that we own debt-free. But guess what? We can go back and put it back into debt to buy it back from ourselves. Again, forgetting that that's also what the previous generation did to us and the generation before them did to us, and we're like, it's starting to seem like a cycle here. So what do you do about it? Well, let's take the operating assets. Those go to Farm Kid because Farm Kid needs the operating assets to, operate a farm. City Kid, we'll give you a financial asset. We'll have a second to die life insurance policy, or if we've got retirement savings from an off-farm job, or what other liquidity we've got that's not tied to operating the farm or ranch, okay, there you go. We're going to take this huge land piece, right, this chunk of value that we don't know what to do with, and stick it into some form of entity, whether that's a trust, whether that's an LLC, just kind of depends on what's right for you. But Farm Kid and City Kid do share in that. Now, here's the kicker. Farm Kid is going to pay fair market value rent to that land entity because that's economically the right thing to do. That reflects the value of that asset. But the beneficiaries of that entity are going to share that rent. So Farm Kid is subsidizing their own rent. They're basically getting a rebate. At the same time, City Kid is getting a regular rate of return on that asset. I'm going to stop here for a second. I want you to think about a stock. Someone gives you a share in AT&T or Facebook or Tesla or whatever. What does that stock have to do to generate value for you? Either it has to pay dividends or you sell it to harvest your equity in it. A farm that you give to a City Kid is no different. You've given them an asset. How do they get value out of it? It's either got to generate cash flow for them in the form of a dividend, or they just need to sell it to get the value out of it because they're probably not going to be content to just sit there and watch it. That's a beautiful farm in the Texas Panhandle. So much topography, right? So much scenery. All right. So, which, by the way, I'm actually talking about you in the one part of the Texas Panhandle that has topography. So that's a terrible joke. If I was in the Oklahoma Panhandle, that would play a lot better, right? So I want you to think about that for a second. In this situation, at least that asset is generating cash that's going out to City Kid. And that could be a big deal for him there. All right. So what do you think, kids? Which one of these is going to stink the worst across the board? You know the answer. strategy one, right? I've built it up to be such a winner anyway, right? But that's what almost everybody does. And I'm here to tell you, folks, the success rate, this is what these percentages are. These are the success rates for those strategies. There's strategy one, across the board, 0% chance of success. Yeah, it satisfies a couple of criteria, but in thousands of simulations, it never worked. You had to basically go out and borrow to even fund you having to buy out your city kid sibling because the farm was not generating enough free cash flow for you to make those payments. You had to get an off-farm job or do something, okay? It didn't get a whole lot better with strategy two, but when we start moving the land piece, we start thinking a little bit more creatively, and we make the off-farm heirs recognize that, hey, this has to look a little different. We can't treat you the same as farm kid and still keep this ranch operational. What do you know? It works a lot. But that means you've got to talk to those people and say, hey, you're probably not going to get exactly what the other guy is going to get. But here's why that's happening, and you got to get them on board with that. So there's a chance, right? You actually could pull this off if you got a little bit more creative and just don't go, I'm going to give it to my kids equally because I love them equally, even though this one kid's been my indentured servant for 20 years and this other one really hasn't done anything at all and just ran off, right, and become a professor. You guys are such a great therapy group. I'm so glad I was able to speak to you guys today. I'm here to tell you that over 64% of U.S. farms and ranches choose strategy one, the one that has a 0% chance of success. Now, I could have higher cash flows and change the success rate, right? But I'm talking to a bunch of cattle producers. You know what your cash flows are, and you know what the return to land ownership is. So I'm here to tell you, it ain't working great in that regard. But you also got to talk about your financial ratios. Like, you know, your asset turnover ratio matters here. Like if your farm generates more cash flow, if you can kind of plug the leaks, do some risk management, you've got a better shot at the next generation actually being able to make a go of it here. So there really are choices there. You've got to think about the costs and whether that cost is something that you pay while you're alive or alternatively something that your heirs pay after you die is an issue. We always think that we're giving this gift of this glorious farmer ranch. And I was talking to somebody in the trade show before I started, and they had a client that had a farm that had been consistently losing $100,000 a year for, I believe it was the past 5 years. But let me bestow this gift to you, my child. You're welcome, okay? So what's happening, right? If we're making that farm kid incur debt to buy an asset that we own free and clear, look at what they're paying under the simulation that we were talking about. On this $3.3 million farmer ranch in terms of net asset value, the annual debt service was about to be $172,000. Do you remember what the net farm income was? It was $100,000. $172,000, $100,000. Do you see there's a little bit of a problem there? So we've got to find a better way because we're killing the equity that we have in our farms and ranches. This is data from an actual farm where they had audited financials going back to 1930. But if you notice, in 1960, 1980, and in 2011, the net worth of their farm got cut in half. And it wasn't because it evaporated. It's because somebody died, so they had to go into debt to buy out their non-farm siblings and start this process over and over. But if you looked at the rate of asset growth that they had, and you hadn't done that, that's a difference of nearly $5 million for this farm. And I don't know about Hemphill County, but I know in Roger Mills County, $5 million is some walking around money, okay? I might buy a new truck. It's crazy, okay? If you think all this stuff sounds abstract and hypothetical, it ain't, okay? I was talking this weekend to one of my former students, Ben Anishat. Ben's father was one of 10 siblings. 5 of them died in the pandemic, including the 3 brothers that were the principals of the farm LLC. Their family farm was on the auction block. Farmland bought $3.2 million and the equipment was another $1 million. And at the last minute, his dad, seen here in this newspaper clipping that I got, Larry, put together enough money to at least buy back the homestead. He got the quarter section of the homestead back that he got to buy back from the family, because did these three brothers, who were all bachelors, by the way, have estate plans? Nope. Did their LLC have a transition plan? Nope. Were their surviving siblings super understanding about all this stuff? Like, hey, take your time, work it out? Nope. This is not abstract, folks. This is the stuff that farmers and ranchers have to deal with. And by the way, Ben's there on the left. Ben doesn't have enough of a farm to be self-supporting anymore as a result of all this. He had to take a job with a local grain merchandiser. And Larry's got enough farm and enough equity in that farm that he's going to be okay. But as far as farming the family farm, that's over, because you had to satisfy all the rest of those heirs. So let's talk about actually doing something about it here, folks. There are 5 steps to building a successful farm transition plan. That's the good news. The bad news is each one of them has 27 sub-steps. Don't focus on that. I want you to focus on the 5. You remember this 5, okay? You can do that. It was totally worth the drive out here from Mulhall, America, for you guys to recognize those 5 steps. And I'll go through this fairly quickly because, again, I don't want you guys to be late for lunch. You've got to do an absolute deep dive on everything you own. I need the deed to the land. I need the title documents to anything else that's got a title document. I need to know how the cars, the tractors, all the equipment's owned. I need to know all the inventories of supplies. I need to know where all the cattle are. All of it. But I also need you to know who your vendors are and who your customers are. And I need you to start cataloging those relationships. And I want you to think about your values and your goals. Because you need to figure out, are the people that I want to do business with in the future, whether they're my siblings, my kids, whatever, do we have compatible values and goals? If we don't, we should not be doing business together. I would much rather preserve the family than the business. I'd like to do both, but if you have completely opposite ways of looking at the world, I don't want you doing business together. My middle brother is a heavily tattooed oil field safety and environmental specialist. I am a very not tattooed, firstborn law professor. We do not view the world the same way, okay? I love him. We laugh together. We enjoy each other's company. We should not run a business together, okay? And you have to be honest with yourself, too, about that and the people that you want to have doing business together in your farm or ranch. Now, we're going to have a talk with our family. And this, folks, might be the hardest thing in this whole process. But you have to ask everyone who has a financial or an emotional stake in your business 2 questions. What do you view as the future of this farm or ranch? And what do you view as your role in that future? And you have to ask that question honestly. It's not you checking a box. I want you to honestly want to know the answer to that. I can't tell you how many farmers or ranchers I've talked to that hate farming and ranching. But they do it because mom and dad wanted them to, or they thought mom and dad wanted them to. I can't tell you how many off-farm heirs I've talked to that would die to come back to the farm or ranch, but mom or dad never asked them if that's what they wanted to do. Because nobody wants to talk to each other. Because you might talk about feelings. In agriculture, you can't catch feelings, right? That's fatal. Folks, talk about it. And as a radical first step, tell the people that you love them. Because if the last year has taught us anything, it's that you need to do that. Here's one fun story. I had a family that I was helping. Mom, dad, and grandpa all caught COVID, all went to the emergency room the same weekend. Dad died within a week of being admitted to the hospital. The next day, Mom calls me nearly in tears, like, he didn't have a will. I know I need to do something. Can you get me something today? And I'm like, today? So in 6 hours, which is a record I never want to break, I put together an estate package for them. I drive down to the Kingfisher County Hospital. I hand it to an ER nurse through the ER doors. They walk it up. I FaceTime, using this very phone, that person through how to execute their will with the nurses there as witnesses, and praise the Lord, one of the witnesses, who was the nurse, was a notary. So we were able to execute the whole thing. She did that, and then she passed away a few weeks later. And there would have been, and now their kids are orphans, okay? And I have to walk you through your family tree when I'm executing your will to show that you have testamentary capacity. And I lost it when I had to ask her, tell us about your family members, and she started to mention her husband, but she remembered he died the day before. Folks, tell the people that you love them. By gosh, I don't care if this is agriculture, you can do that. If they're sitting next to you, take a second, do it right now. I won't even look. I'll turn the other way. You don't have to show anyone else that you're actually expressing a positive emotion to somebody that you work with, okay? All right. You've got to have this conversation with your stakeholders, okay? You're going to do this on a neutral field site. You're going to do this with all the stakeholders present. It's not going to be on a holiday. And you'll all ignore my advice and do this on Christmas. Where do you celebrate Christmas? In the house of the oldest living generation, right? And you only have family meetings on Christmas because that's where everybody's together, right? And where do you have your family meetings? In the dining room, right? Where does everybody sit? In their spot, right? Where dad sits at the head of the table, mom sitteth at the right hand of the Father Almighty, and you sit where you shoved Cheerios up your nose in a high chair when you were a kid, right? And do you feel that you can have an open, honest conversation about how you feel and how you can tell those folks stuff that they might not want to hear in that environment? I guess not, right? So go down to the production credit office or the extension office or something and make it neutral, but really have a talk. And folks, you're going to have to fix everything else before you get to this transition stuff. When I've had these conversations, I've found out about adultery, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, drug abuse, sexual orientation, issues of faith, you name it. And guess what? You got to deal with that before you deal with this, which is why you might want to have someone who's gifted at family communications come in and help you out. Have a facilitator. Heck, get a lawyer. You already hate us anyway. I don't mind being the bad guy in your family meeting. I'm happy to be good cop because guess what? I'm not coming to Christmas anyway, okay? You can hate me and kick me out the door. Can you believe that jerk from Oklahoma? But fine, hate me, like each other. But have these conversations because you got to get that stuff out there. Talk about the issues with farm kids and city kids and how they have different economic views of life. I want you to talk about the difference between entitlement versus opportunity. You're not entitled to stuff other people worked for. However, if you worked for it, maybe you do feel like you have some sense of entitlement to it. But you've got to talk about that. You have to figure out how to value the contributions of people who work on your farm and ranch. And if you got people that don't, but they want to be involved with it, you got to show them a path. Hey, if you want to invest in this farm or ranch, that's great. Don't expect to get something for nothing. But if you want to put some capital in and help us expand, we'll participate in the revenues with you. But you've got to make that clear. You have to show people from the time that they're born, hey, this is not some inheritance that you get someday. It's an opportunity that you can make something of if you develop yourself to be somebody who can make a contribution to this farm or ranch. But that has to be taught from day one. And we also have to talk about the fact that equal is not equitable. Equal is the same. Equal is, I love all my kids equally, so they're all going to get everything in undivided. And so help me, undivided interests are the bane of my lawyer existence. Have the guts to carve something up, right? You get this tract, you get that tract. I don't want that tract. I want the other tract. Fine. Whoop, switch. Oh, well, that's not really what I meant. No. That's what you said. Okay? But people need to get stuff in chunks. Don't make them share and share alike. And so help me, if you name all of your 5 kids as co-trustees who all have to agree unanimously, you get what you deserve, right? I don't care if you have a favorite kid. You're picking one of them to be a trustee because how many captains does a ship have? 1. Because if ships were run by committee, they'd be submarines, okay? Then you've got to figure out a way for this business to make it to the next generation while it's still in business. Farmers and ranchers punt all this stuff like it's estate planning. Yeah, estate planning is a piece of it. It's not all of it. If you want truly for your farm or ranch to be a viable operation for that next generation, it's got to stay viable through the transition. And so often when we have an estate transfer, right, it's like taking a nice tray of crystal and going to your kids, here, catch, right? When you could have very carefully, gently handed them this nice tray of crystal versus flinging it at their head at some random point, right? So you need to have a plan for how this is going to happen, both according to plan, right? If everyone dies when they're supposed to and is considerate that way, but what if somebody's incredibly rude and dies out of order, okay? Or what if there are 3 people in your LLC and all of them die within 3 weeks of one another? How's all that going to work? You have to have a plan for how that business is going to survive. P.S. That means teaching people about how your business works, not, hey, 40-year-old kid who has multiple business degrees, go out there and run the planner. Like, why do we do the things we do? Why do we have the asset mix that we do? Why do we have the whole farm plan that we do? How do we manage risk? Open the black box. Let them see. And that might mean that you show them some embarrassing farm decisions that you've made. I run into that all the time. Dad doesn't want to open the black box because the black box contains some whoopsies that Dad has made over the past 50 years. But folks, if you want to see your family succeed, understand you get a lifetime of farm experience only one lifetime at a time. Kind of makes sense, right? Share what you know with that next generation while you can. And you learn from the mistakes way more than you learn from the successes. So you got to share that with them if you really want to see them succeed. And then also, if you don't have somebody coming along, right, as an heir, all right, well, let's find a successor. Is there somebody out there that's hungry, that wants to grow their operation, that we can trust and that we can build a relationship with? Develop a successor if you don't actually have one sitting there in your own family tree. There are ways to do that. And then there is, obviously, estate planning. So what percentage of the U.S. population do you think has no estate planning tools in place whatsoever? Some of you are already saying, well, Farrell, it must be 65. You told us only the most grim statistics the whole way. It's better than that. It's 55%. That's way better. The 65%, that's agriculture. That's the ag sector. In an industry where the average operations net worth, according to the most recent USDA data, is $1.2 million, 2/3 of us don't have any estate planning tools in place, which just makes me want to have an aneurysm. Like, I don't get that. You've spent multiple generations building this stuff up, and like, oh, when I die, right? It's kind of what you're doing. Understand, in not choosing, you have chosen. So, if you do nothing else as a result of this presentation, I want you to go make sure that you have these things, and I am absolutely 100% serious about this. You need this stuff. If you don't believe me, I've dealt with a few estates, folks, okay? If you have kids under the age of 18, they need to have a guardian, someone who can take custodial care of them if something happens to both of their parents. You need beneficiary designations on all of your financial assets to tell them where to go when something happens to you. You need a power of attorney that is durable, meaning it's still in place if you are incapacitated, for business activities and for healthcare activities. They can be one person, but they could also be different. The person with your health care power of attorney needs to understand what you want to have done in terms of health care decisions. But there's also the advanced directive for health care, which is about end-of-life issues. And you need to talk with your family and the person that holds your advanced directive about what you want to have happen if you're in a terminal state or if you're in a permanent, state of brain inactivity. You got to have a talk with your family about that. Don't make them make that decision for you. And then everybody needs to have a will. But I've got a trust. Nifty. You need to have a will too, right? Because I know what you did. You went to a lawyer, you spent $5,000, you have this really nice leather binder, and you never put a piece of property into that trust. I know how you work. That takes money, right? If you make a trust, put stuff into it. That's what it's there for, to have things, okay? So if you have a trust, put stuff into it, but you still need to have a will, if for no other reason than to round up all the stuff that you forgot to put in the trust and put it into the trust, okay? And if you don't have a trust, you need to have a will, okay? It's not hard. For the love of all that is decent and holy, don't go home tonight and get on LegalZoom and try to do this yourself, okay? Have someone who actually has a law degree do it for you because you spent a lifetime building this operation, but I'm going to save $50, right? No, have an actual pro do it. And then, of course, the trust is a good tool for lots of people. It avoids probate. It makes things go a lot faster, but talk to an attorney, talk to an accountant, and see how that actually needs to work for you. And then life insurance can be a huge tool. I'm not saying everybody needs it. There are certain circumstances where, man, it can be an invaluable tool. And in some circumstances, it can almost be kind of redundant. If you're in a really good equity position and you've got good liquidity, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if that's not you, then it is a really big deal. And then everybody needs to have a hit by a blank plan. And I mean this very literally. If something were to happen to you today, and we're not even talking about death, you're incapacitated, you got corona, you're in the hospital on a ventilator for 3 weeks. How do we do what you do? Where are the keys? Where are the passwords? Where are the cattle? Where is the feed? Where are the bank accounts? But everything that we need to instantaneously pick up and do the stuff that you do, whether you're the principal operator or you're the tractor jock like me, we need to know how to do what you do. And then recognize every time somebody's born, every time somebody dies, every time somebody gets married, every time somebody gets divorced, whenever we buy something or sell something, or just on some sort of regular basis, we need to go back and check the plan and make sure that it actually works. Before I let you go, and I'm going to tell you about how to build your team and tell you one last story because I know I need to get you guys to lunch. This is Leonard Rogozov. He was the surgeon on a Russian Antarctic expedition, and while they're on the expedition, Leonid got appendicitis. You're the one doctor on your mission. Who removes your appendix? You do. Leonid removed his own appendix. He gave himself local anesthetic. He had the mechanic hand him tools, but he did it to himself. Can you remove your own appendix? Yup. Should you? Not if you have any choice. Can you build your own estate plan? Hypothetically. Should you if you have any choice? No. So build a team. I don't care if it's the Dirty Dozen, the Magnificent Seven, the Avengers, or Charlie Brown's All-Stars. You can't do this by yourself. So get yourself an accountant to talk about the tax issues. Get yourself an attorney to walk you through the legal mechanics. Get yourself a production consultant to figure out if you can financially pull off the stuff that you need to do for this transition plan to work. Get yourself an investment advisor because you might need to invest in something other than farmland or green paint or red paint if that's your thing, right? It's okay to have off-farm investments. It's fine. It's called diversifying risk. An HR advisor to help you get the right people on the right seats of the bus so that your farm is actually putting people in roles where they can have success. And then get yourself a referee, like a mediator or somebody if there are difficult family conversations and intractable positions that need to be negotiated. Get some help. Have somebody that's external to the family help you through those conversations so you can actually have a positive result and actually like each other when you're done. Because when I have talked to hundreds of farm families, do you know almost unanimously what they rank for me as their top priority, it's keeping the family together. And I want that to be your priority in your transition plan. It's great to keep the ranch together. It's better to keep the family together. And if we can keep the family together on the ranch, hey, gravy, right? It can be done, folks. This is the Crabill family. Brittany was one of my students. She's there on the right. Her dad's not pictured there because in 2011, he passed away from brain cancer, leaving Brittany and her grandpa, to run the farm. And they also have a multi-state irrigation company. But then he passed away in 2016 of a tumor almost identical to his son's, leaving 21-year-old Brittany to be the CEO of a 5,000-acre farm and ranch and a multi-state irrigation company. And you know what? She did just fine because they had a plan. They'd worked through it all. And from the time she was old enough to walk, Brittany was taught everything about those businesses. They took her along on every sales call. They made sure she knew every vendor. Her mom's a CPA. She was groomed to be a successor, and she's doing fantastic. I got to do her wedding to Logan, who married way out of his league. Don't tell Logan that. And then last year, that guy shows up. That's Myers. And there's your next generation right there who's already being groomed to be a successor as well. Folks, if you choose not to choose, you've chosen. If you want to sit around and do nothing and hope that people just settle it after you die, okay, that can happen, but be proactive, make the courageous choice. It's not an if question, it's a when question, and not talking to people is far more deadly than actually having those tough conversations. Understand that the people that you work with, your family, they want choice. They'll crave it, and they'll find a way to act out about that if you don't give them some say in the future that they have in the farm or ranch. By the way, younger generations in the room, you have a right to talk to the senior generation about this stuff if they won't talk to you. I'm here to tell you as an objective third party, you have a right to have that conversation there. But here's what I'll leave you with, and I know I got to let you guys go because food's awaiting. All the farmers and ranchers I talk to about this will tell me, I want my farm to stay together and I want to see my family succeed on the farm. Then don't do this only in an estate mode. Give them the benefit of your experience. Give them some responsibility and give yourself the chance while you're alive to see them succeed. Because that's what you want. And it takes a little bit of courage, but just with a little bit of courage, you can do it. And you guys are the most courageous people I know. And with that, I'm going to shut up and let you guys eat. If you want more resources, that's the website. That's how to get a hold of me. You guys are fantastic. Hope you have a wonderful trip while you're here and have a safe journey home. And best of success for the prosperity for you and all the generations to follow after you. Thank you guys very much.
Hi, I'm Jason Barber. I'm with Superior Livestock Auction, and I also know I'm the only thing standing between y'all and lunch right now, so I'll keep this pretty brief. I want to thank Andy for having us be a part of this great event again this year. But to just give you some overview of Superior Livestock, I'm going to give a real brief description, but I've got some of the absolute best cattle that sell on Superior come out of the Panhandle here, and we've got a couple great reps here, Will Durrett and Clint DeArmond. I believe Carson Wamble will be here this afternoon, but invite you guys to come to our booth. We're back in the corner there. Come visit with these guys, and maybe they can help you with your operation or visit with you about the market. Just kind of give you some tips if you're interested in selling on Superior Livestock. But big differentiator on Superior is we are the largest cattle merchandiser in North America. We'll sell close to 1.5 million head of cattle this year. We obviously believe in true price discovery, and the cattle are majority sold on at auction. We also sell cattle private treaty, and we sell them every day of the week, and we have an auction every single week. But the majority of our cattle will sell during the summertime, and they'll deliver in the fall, because one of the big factors on Superior is you can go ahead and mark your cattle on contract for immediate or future delivery. So if the market gets hot next week, you can sell them then and deliver them in the fall. So a lot of advantages there. If you want to sell on Superior, we sell them 50,000 pounds at a time. So you need to have enough cattle that you can do a good sort and send a unified or uniform set on the truck. But another big advantage on Superior is we have over 8,500 buyers, and they're active buyers. They're not someone that bought 3 years ago and hasn't bid since then. They're very active, and that allows us to generate great premiums when we have a good set of cattle that are on a good health program. And then especially program cattle, ones that are NHTC, Verified Natural Beef, or GAP certified, those things consistently ring a bell on Superior because of the buyer base that we have. But anyway, in my 15th year with Superior, I grew up at Channing, Texas on a Hereford ranch that's been in my family since 1904. It surprised you how many people, reps and employees of Superior Livestock are from the 806 area code. But anyway, we'd love to do business with you, love to visit with you if you've got the time. But again, we've got Will Durrett, Clint DeArmond, and should have Carson Womble back at our booth later this afternoon. So if we can help you market your cattle, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you.